Have you ever run into someone by accident? And just by looking into their eyes, your entire past, the one you tried to bury for years, suddenly came rushing back. No chaos, no warning, just a moment, a seemingly ordinary moment. But somehow, deep down, nothing will ever be the same again. Jonathan Blake, a successful CEO in New York City, stepped out of a gleaming skyscraper on Fifth Avenue. In his hands were multi-million-dollar contracts. In his mind, cold numbers and deals still waiting to be closed. He had no idea that, right there on the sidewalk, among strangers and traffic and noise, he would see something that would shake his entire world to its core. A gust of wind swept through. Papers flew from his hands, scattering across the pavement. He bent down to gather them, and then a small voice spoke. "Let me help you, mister." A little girl, maybe 6 years old. Bright eyes, soft curls, a smile as pure as morning light. Jonathan smiled faintly. But then, he saw it. A gold bracelet. Tiny, delicate, unmistakable. He had given that bracelet to Claire, the woman he once loved more than anything. The same woman he walked away from. 6 years ago, the girl looked up at him, eyes shimmering. And when she spoke, "Mommy gave me this bracelet. She said it used to belong to Daddy." Jonathan froze. Not because of the bracelet, not because of her words, but because he saw himself in that little girl's eyes. Jonathan stood frozen. The bracelet on the little girl's tiny wrist caught the sunlight. A glint of gold, like a crack in the wall he'd spent 6 years building around himself. That little girl, Lily, had no idea that her innocent words had just shattered the carefully constructed world of the man standing before her. He couldn't look away. The way she tilted her head when she smiled, the light in her eyes, it was uncannily like Claire. And just like himself, before he knew what it meant to be afraid, Lily had no clue what was unfolding inside that man's chest. To her, he was just an adult who dropped some papers. She only wanted to help. But to Jonathan, this was no simple act of kindness. It was a collision with the past, with truth, with himself. His voice came out hoarse, barely audible. "What's your name?" "I'm Lily," she chirped, then pointed across the street. "My mommy's in that cafe. She's getting me cookies." Jonathan turned. Through the foggy glass, he saw the silhouette of a woman, back turned, long brown hair cascading down her back, standing at the counter choosing pastries. His heart pounded. The world shrank into a single point. A sidewalk cafe, and the woman inside. Claire. He couldn't mistake her. Not even after 6 years. Not after convincing himself she had moved on. That maybe she had forgotten him entirely. That maybe the child she once spoke of had never even existed. But now, the truth was undeniable. It stood right before him, alive, innocent, and calling him by a name he had never dared to claim. Father. He looked at Lily one last time, then inhaled deeply and stepped into the street. Each footstep felt like it crushed another piece of the past he had tried to forget. He could see himself 6 years ago, as Claire stood crying in that empty apartment. And he turned his back and walked away. He remembered her last words, sharp as a blade. "If you walk away today, don't ever come back." The cafe door swung open with a soft chime, just enough to make Claire turn around. She saw him. She blinked. And suddenly, the entire cafe fell silent, like a single note choking in the throat of a song. She stood there, her expression shifting from disbelief to ice. She said nothing, didn't ask why he was here, didn't run to him. She just looked, as if weighing whether what she saw was real or just a ghost. Jonathan couldn't bear the silence anymore. He stepped closer, stopped, just a breath away. And then, from the depths of his guilt, he said the words that cost him everything to speak. "Claire, the little girl, she's mine, isn't she?" Claire didn't blink. She gently set the bag of cookies on the counter. And in that moment, her gaze was no longer the gaze of a woman who once loved. It was the gaze of a mother who had fought the world alone. "Yes," she said, her voice terrifyingly calm. "She's your daughter, and you are the man who chose not to be her father." The air in the cafe thickened. Jonathan stood still. Claire said nothing. The distance between them was only a few steps, but it felt like 10,000 miles of memories crashing down all at once. She didn't flinch. She didn't turn away, but she didn't soften either. She just stood there, her gaze cutting through him, slice by slice. Jonathan didn't know where to begin. He used to be the best at handling crises, negotiating billion-dollar deals. But now, he couldn't find a single right word. At last, he exhaled, as if everything in his chest was ready to shatter. I didn't know she was real, he said, voice trembling. Claire, that day, you said you were pregnant. But I didn't believe you. Or maybe, I was too scared to believe it. Claire let out a soft laugh. It wasn't angry. It wasn't amused. It was simply tired. You were too scared to believe it, she repeated. So you vanished? Cut off every line of contact? Changed your number, your address, your whole life as if I, and that child, had never existed. Her question landed like a slap without ever touching him. Jonathan bowed his head. No defense. No excuses. I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid I'd become my father. Afraid I'd hurt you, the way he hurt my mother. I thought, if I stayed, I'd destroy both of us. So I ran. Claire's fingers clenched tightly around the pastry bag on the counter. She remembered that day. The way he walked out, the way the door shut behind him and never opened again. You know what the cruelest part was? She said quietly, it wasn't that you didn't love me. It was that you knew I needed you. And you left anyway. Jonathan closed his eyes. Every word struck his heart like a stone, reminding him of everything he had lost. Not just a child, but a family, a chance to truly love. I didn't come here to ask for forgiveness, he said. I came for her, because for the first time, I saw myself in someone so small. And I knew, if I didn't do something, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. Claire said nothing. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just looked at the man who once was her everything, now standing before her, more broken than she had ever seen. And then, as if the entire world tilted slightly, Lily came running in. Mommy! Her voice chirped as she clutched her chocolate chip cookie, her eyes lighting up the moment she saw Jonathan. Mister, I picked chocolate chip. Jonathan bent down, forcing a smile, though his eyes were red. Claire looked at her daughter, and for the first time, she saw them, not as two strangers, but as two pieces of the same shattered puzzle. She said nothing more. She simply placed a hand on Lily's shoulder, then looked Jonathan in the eye. You want to be a father? She asked, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. Then start, by not disappearing again. Jonathan had never felt so small. He had once stood in international auditoriums, addressed hundreds of shareholders, and made decisions that shook entire financial markets. But never once in his life had his hands trembled, just because he was about to face a child who carried half his blood, and he had no idea where to begin. Claire had agreed. Not forgiveness, just permission. Permission to meet Lily a few times, under clear boundaries. No surprises, no broken promises. Claire had made it clear. Lily doesn't need one more disappointment. And Jonathan understood. This chance wasn't about making it right for the past. It was about doing the right thing, for the first time in his life. That afternoon, he stood at the edge of Central Park. In his hand was a small paper bag of donuts, Claire's favorite back then, and a tiny teddy bear with a blue bow he hoped Lily would like. He arrived early, very early, almost an hour before their scheduled meeting. When Claire and Lily arrived, the little girl ran ahead, her hand waving high, her cheeks pink from the cold wind. Mister, I missed you. Lily's voice rang out like they'd known each other forever. Jonathan knelt down instinctively and wrapped her in a hug. The feeling caught in his throat. There was no hesitation, no fear. She opened her heart, as if there had never been any wounds. Claire stood a few steps behind, arms crossed, eyes observing. Not cold, but clearly keeping her distance. They sat together on a park bench. Jonathan awkwardly pulled out the donut box and offered it to Lily. She eagerly grabbed the biggest one, her legs swinging happily as she took a bite. Then they walked through the park. Jonathan told Lily silly stories from when he was her age. She giggled uncontrollably. Claire, without realizing, smiled softly, just a little, as she watched the two of them, genuinely connecting. When it was time to part, Lily tugged Jonathan's hand. Will you come again next time? Jonathan nodded. I promise. And for the first time, he said it without fear. That night, Claire sat alone in her small kitchen. A cup of tea had gone cold in her hand. Outside the window, the city lights flickered in the never-ending hum of New York. She replayed the look in Jonathan's eyes when he saw Lily. There was nothing fake, nothing rushed. Just one thing crystal clear. He was trying, not for forgiveness, not to fix it and disappear again, but because he truly wanted to be a part of a world he once chose to leave behind. Claire didn't know if she could forgive. She wasn't sure. But today, when she saw her daughter hug Jonathan, and heard Lily's laughter, pure and unguarded, she knew something had begun. 1 week after that first meeting, Claire received a letter from Lily's school, an annual event, Spring Fair, where kindergartners would sing, showcase their drawings, and enjoy cookies under the sun. Lily had been excited all week. She made a paper flower crown by herself, glued pink and purple tulips onto her poster, and every night made Claire listen to her sing, "You Are My Sunshine," at least 4 times. Jonathan was invited, not because Claire reached out, but because Lily handed him the invitation herself. And this time, he didn't arrive a minute late. That morning, the sky was bright and clear. The schoolyard was decorated with colorful flags, balloons, and tiny plastic chairs lined up neatly. Jonathan showed up in a rolled-sleeve shirt, holding a small bouquet and a bag of donuts, Lily's favorite. He looked a bit awkward among the other parents, but his eyes never left his daughter. Lily ran straight into his arms, wrapping her tiny hands around his waist without hesitation. Claire watched from a distance, silently. The space between them hadn't quite closed, but it no longer felt as cold. Then the performance began. Lily stood in the front row, her hair tied with a white ribbon, and sang with a clear, innocent voice. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." Jonathan almost forgot to breathe. It wasn't just a song. It was redemption. It was a second chance he thought he'd never have. After the performance, families scattered to the tables with cookies and juice. Jonathan stood beside Lily near the treats, chatting cheerfully with a couple of other moms. And then, a voice rose up, not loud, but sharp enough. Right behind Lily. "See that man? Yeah, I heard he's the father. Left when Claire was still pregnant. 6 years, and now he suddenly comes back, probably just feeling guilty. Some people don't deserve a second chance." Lily froze. The cup of grape juice in her hand trembled. She didn't understand all the grown-up words, but she felt the cold, the distance, the sting. Jonathan kept smiling, unaware. He leaned in and whispered, "Want another cookie, Lily?" But this time, she just shook her head. On the way home, Lily was unusually quiet. No singing, no questions, no swinging her legs to the music. Claire drove in silence, sensing something was off. When they got home, Lily didn't run to her room like she usually did. Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed, gently removed her flower crown, and placed it on the pillow. Claire sat beside her, voice soft. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Lily turned to her. Her eyes were slightly red, her voice tiny, as if a sob was stuck in her throat. "This morning, some lady said, Daddy didn't want me, that he left." Claire froze. In that moment, all the fears that had once made her hesitant about Jonathan came rushing back. In the cruelest way imaginable. She pulled Lily close, wrapping her arms around her. Her hand gently stroked her daughter's back, just like when she was a baby. "They don't know the whole story, honey. But I do, and I see it clearly now, that your dad came back. And this time, he's trying." Lily didn't answer. Claire kissed her forehead. She knew today had been a step backward, but it was also a test. A child can forgive, but their trust can't afford to be broken again. That night, Claire didn't sleep right away. She stood quietly in the doorway of Lily's room, watching her daughter clutch the teddy bear tighter than usual. The room was silent, but Claire could feel the storm still turning in her little girl's heart. The words from that morning, though not aimed directly at Lily, had landed like thorns in a tender place. And Claire knew, if Jonathan truly wanted to be a father, he'd have to learn how to soothe wounds, some of which he'd helped create. The next morning, Jonathan showed up, earlier than usual. No flowers, no gifts, just a small bag, inside, a fresh set of crayons and a blank sketchbook. Claire opened the door. She didn't say much, just looked at him, a look that silently asked, "Do you know what happened?" Jonathan nodded. "Claire, can I have a few minutes?" She said nothing, then gave a soft nod. "Lily's in the living room." He stepped in. Lily was sitting on the rug, doodling with worn-out crayons. Jonathan knelt beside her. No touch, no raised voice, just gently placed the sketchbook in front of her. "I brought this, in case there's something you want to draw, something that's hard to say out loud." Lily glanced up. No reaction. She just kept drawing. Jonathan didn't leave. He sat there silently for more than 20 minutes. No pushing, no explaining, no justifying, just being there. Finally, Lily set the crayon down. She didn't look at him, but quietly asked, They said you didn't want me. Is that true? Jonathan froze. He hadn't prepared for that question. There was no perfect answer, only the truth. I was scared, he said softly, honestly. Scared I wouldn't know how to be a dad. Scared I'd hurt you, the way my dad hurt me. He took a breath. But I was wrong, because leaving, that hurt you. It let you grow up missing something that should have always been there. Lily turned to him. There was no anger in her eyes, just waiting. Jonathan slowly extended a hand, as if reaching for something fragile. I don't want your tears to come from what other people say. So from now on, if you're sad or scared, ask me. I'll answer. I'll show up. And I'll stay. Lily looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded, quietly stood up, and leaned her head gently on his shoulder. No words, just a small, quiet lean. But to Jonathan, it was the first act of forgiveness. Behind the door, Claire had heard everything. She didn't interrupt. She didn't step in. And for the first time since he came back, she thought maybe she wasn't the only one who had changed. That afternoon, as Jonathan prepared to leave, he turned to look at Claire. He didn't say thank you, just gave her a small nod. Claire nodded back. You can come on Saturday. Lily's planning a new treasure map. Jonathan smiled. No big grin, no dramatic words, just a real quiet smile. Since that morning, things began to change. Not through dramatic twists. No tearful breakdowns. No grand promises. Just small things. Real things. Jonathan stopped showing up like a stranger trying to justify his presence. He came because of Lily. Because of Saturday afternoons in the park. Because of colorful drawings and treasure maps Lily created from pure imagination. The first time Claire invited him to stay for dinner. It wasn't a fancy affair. Just spaghetti with sauce that turned out a little too salty. Because Lily kept chatting and insisted on stirring it herself. Jonathan cleaned his plate, and he washed the dishes. Claire didn't say a word, just watched quietly, as he awkwardly wiped away the soap bubbles, like it was a skill he was only just learning. That night, Lily grabbed her favorite picture book and ran over to him. Daddy, will you read this to me? The word daddy slipped out so naturally. Jonathan froze. Claire did too. No one had told her to say it, and she didn't need to be told. Jonathan sat down and opened the book. His voice was a little stiff at first, but Lily giggled every time he did a silly villain voice. Claire leaned on the doorframe. She couldn't remember the last time this home had laughter from all three of them. Maybe it never had. In the days that followed, Jonathan started showing up more often. Not intrusively, not demanding anything, just being there. He learned that Lily liked her sandwiches cut diagonally, no crust. That she wore her green jacket every Monday because green brings good luck. He learned how to braid her doll's hair. Not very well, but Lily still said it was the most beautiful braid in the world. Claire noticed, and some nights, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, she didn't feel alone anymore. Not because she had forgiven him, but because, for the first time in 6 years, she wasn't carrying the weight of everything alone. One rainy afternoon, when the park was no longer an option, the three of them stayed inside and played parcheesi in the living room. Jonathan always lost, partly because Lily was good, and partly because he let her win. Claire watched them and thought, some things can't be undone, but some people, if they truly want to, can learn how to stay. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Claire poured 2 cups of tea. Jonathan sat across from her in silence. She placed the cup in front of him and said evenly, you know, there was a time I thought, if you ever came back, I'd slam the door in your face. He didn't respond. But now, I think if you left again, I might be the one most hurt. Jonathan looked up. His eyes weren't glowing with that Wall Street dealmaker confidence. Just quiet and full of gratitude. Claire didn't say anything more. She stood, turned off most of the lights. The kitchen light remained, casting a soft golden glow. 2 people sat in a small apartment. No longer strangers. Not quite a family, but something new, gently forming in the quiet. It was a drizzly Wednesday morning. Claire had just picked Lily up from school when she saw Jonathan standing at the door, umbrella in hand, shirt damp from the rain. I brought warm donuts, he said with a soft smile, and 2 little spoons in case the rain stops and we want to share some ice cream. Claire chuckled. The rain didn't stop, and the ice cream had already melted. But Lily lit up when she saw him, as if he were the best part of her day. They decided to stay in, put on a cartoon, ate donuts on the carpet like kids. Claire watched the 2 of them, one big, one small, laughing together like time didn't exist. No more scheduled visits. No more "Daddy's here now." Jonathan was just here, like he belonged in the everyday. That weekend, Lily's school hosted a parent day. Claire hadn't planned to go, but Lily pleaded with her. "We're doing a family drawing contest. I drew all three of us. You have to come see." Claire nodded. Jonathan came too. The event was held outdoors under a white canvas tent. Children's drawings hung from strings, flapping gently in the breeze. Lily beamed as she pointed at her drawing. 3 people standing together, hand in hand, under one roof. It was clumsy, childlike, but it held an entire world. Jonathan stood beside Lily when another parent approached, looked at the drawing, and casually remarked, "Oh, that's sweet. Wait, is that her real dad? I thought he left before she was even born." The words sliced the smile right off Lily's face. She froze, eyes wide, trying to make sense of why grown-ups talked about her dad like that. Jonathan turned. Not angry, not defensive. He crouched down to Lily's eye level. "Lily, did you hear what that man said?" "Yes." "Then listen to me." He gently held her tiny hands in his. "People can say whatever they want, but only you. Only you know if your dad is here or not. I've made mistakes, big ones, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. And none of this is your fault. You are the most beautiful gift I've ever received." Lily's eyes welled with tears. She nodded, then wrapped her arms around him, right there in the middle of the bustling schoolyard. Claire stood in the distance. She heard everything, but what she saw wasn't just a man good with kids. It was a man taking responsibility, not dodging, not raging, not rewriting the past, just facing it, staying, protecting. That night, Claire tucked Lily into bed. Before turning off the light, she asked gently, "Were you okay today, sweetie?" Lily sat up, tugged on her mom's sleeve, and whispered, "I was really sad when they said that, but when Daddy held my hand, I wasn't sad anymore." Claire held her tight, said nothing, just felt something inside her ease, like a door quietly unlocking. A Friday afternoon, the golden sun stretched softly over the city. A rare breeze slipped between high-rise buildings. In Claire's small apartment, the window was slightly ajar, and the gentle scent of tomato sauce filled the room. Jonathan was placing sandwiches on plates. Lily stood beside him, wearing a pink apron with a bunny on it, happily setting out spoons and forks. Claire washed her hands, drying them with an old cotton towel. No one mentioned the reunion. No one asked, "What are we now?" It was simply dinner. Claire no longer stood at a distance, no longer crossed her arms watching Jonathan, like a stranger intruding on her world. She noticed how he picked the exact juice Lily liked, how he knew Lily only ate carrots if they were cut into flower shapes. She saw how he knelt down to tie Lily's shoes, even though his knees trembled slightly as he stood up. She saw him, as if he'd always been there, for a very long time. At the table, Lily talked about her new lessons at school. Jonathan listened, asking a few questions here and there. He didn't interrupt, didn't pretend to be excited. He just genuinely cared. Claire watched him, not with caution, not with suspicion, but with the gaze of someone, learning to breathe a little easier, because there was now a man in her home, who didn't make her carry the weight of everything alone. After dinner, Lily ran to her room, to draw a new treasure map. Jonathan stayed to help Claire with the dishes. She dried. He rinsed. No one said much, but the sound of water and dishes clinking together felt like the sound of a family. Claire wiped her hands and leaned back against the kitchen cabinet. Jonathan looked at her, as if about to say something, but stopped. It was Claire who finally spoke. "You know, there was a time I believed that if any man ever showed up again, after disappearing for 6 years, I'd never trust him." Jonathan waited, not defensive, not expecting anything. She continued, "But I realized something. Sometimes the most trustworthy thing isn't someone who says, 'Trust me,' but someone who just quietly does the right thing every single day." Jonathan swallowed, not from emotion, but because, for the first time, he felt truly seen. That night, he read Lily her bedtime story, as he had been doing lately. When she fell asleep, he stepped out of the room and found Claire waiting in the hallway. She didn't ask, "Are you leaving now?" She didn't walk him to the door. She just said softly, "I have a meeting at 5 on Monday. If you're free, could you pick Lily up a bit earlier for me?" Jonathan stood still, then nodded, not because of the request itself, but because in that single sentence, Claire had trusted him enough to become part of their real, everyday routine. No longer the man who came back. No longer someone trying to make things right. Jonathan had become something bigger, an ordinary person who was needed. Spring arrived slowly in New York. The trees lining the sidewalks had just begun to change, fresh leaves stretching through the lingering cold of winter. Inside their small apartment, life moved as usual. Lily woke up before the alarm clock. Claire drank her coffee black, no sugar. Jonathan arrived right on time, sometimes a few minutes early, just to catch the moment Lily ran to greet him. Her slippers still not properly on, but deep inside Jonathan, something remained unsettled. He was living the very thing he once believed he had lost forever. A home, a rhythm, a little girl who called him dad with the purest trust. And Claire, the woman who once loved him to the point of breaking, who now stood across from him every day, steady, composed, as if she had never been left behind. She didn't blame him. She never brought up the past, but she also never said that she had forgiven him. One night, after Lily had gone to bed, they sat together on the balcony, watching the city from the 10th floor. Jonathan broke the silence first. I keep thinking, if you hadn't given me this chance, I would have understood, because I know I didn't deserve it. Claire didn't turn to him. She looked down at the glittering streetlights below. Because you left? Because I was afraid. Because when you needed me most, I disappeared. 6 years, long enough for you to learn how to not need me. His words came slow, each one drawn from somewhere deep. I'm not asking for instant forgiveness. I'm not asking to be called family. But if someday you feel like I could be someone you lean on, I'll be here. I'm not running again. Claire finally turned to him. Her eyes weren't warm or cold. They were just real. You don't have to wait for that day. Jonathan blinked. Claire continued, her voice soft but full of meaning. Because that day already came. Not when you read stories to Lily. Not when you made dinner. But when you stopped trying to prove anything and just stayed. There was no kiss in that moment. No dramatic music. No perfectly timed "I love you." Just one hand, reaching for another, and holding it. Not shaking. Not rushed. Just right. That night, after Jonathan left, Claire stayed up a little longer. She opened the drawer and took out the bracelet, the old one he gave her years ago, worn, but never lost. She placed it on the table, next to a small piece of paper Lily had scribbled in crayon. Dad, Mom, me. Our family, okay? Claire stared at that paper for a long time, and then she smiled. By late April, New York had begun to warm. Lavender blossoms peeked through trees lining the street. Children in light tees and sundresses ran across the schoolyard, laughter mingling with the chirps of birds and the distant echo of a loudspeaker. At Edison Preschool, it was time for the familiar event, the Spring Festival. Claire found the notice taped inside Lily's notebook. Parents invited. Students will perform and give a tour of the garden they've tended themselves. Lily was thrilled. All week, she talked about her new dress, her song, and most importantly, Daddy's coming too, right, Mommy? I want to show him to my friends. Claire hesitated for just a second, then nodded. He'll be there. That morning, Jonathan arrived earlier than usual. He wore a simple white rolled-up shirt, khaki pants, and held a bouquet of yellow daffodils. Not the sleek suit of a Manhattan CEO, but the clothes of a father attending his daughter's very first school performance. Claire spotted him from a distance, and for the first time, she didn't need to brace herself. She didn't need to wonder. Will he show up? He already had, and he wasn't going anywhere. The schoolyard was dressed in fabric streamers, balloons, and the children's paintings. Lily, in a white dress with a handmade paper flower crown, ran to Jonathan like it was the most important day of her life. Daddy, you came. Jonathan knelt down, scooping her into his arms. The bouquet nearly slipped from his hand, but he didn't care. Claire followed close behind, holding a water bottle and tissues. Jonathan turned and smiled. Claire smiled back, softly, then stood beside him. Not too close, not too far. Just close enough that anyone looking would understand. When the performances began, Lily and her classmates sang, "You Are My Sunshine." Jonathan stood among the parents. His phone buzzed quietly in his pocket, unread emails, missed calls. He didn't notice. His eyes never left the girl in the front row, waving to him mid-song. The world could keep turning, but for him, there was only her voice, echoing in the spring sunlight. Afterward, the kids led their families to the back garden. Lily held Jonathan's hand in one, Claire's in the other. Small hands, warm and determined. She stopped in front of a bed of purple tulips, raised both arms like a proud little presenter. This is my mom, and this is my dad. This is my family. Simple. No explanation. No apology. Just truth. A nearby boy whispered curiously, "Where's your dad been all this time?" Lily turned, calm and confident. He was looking for treasure maps, but now he's found one. Jonathan nearly lost his breath. Claire turned away, pretending to reach for a tissue. But really she was wiping her eyes. That afternoon, the three of them walked home together. Lily skipped ahead, hopping between cracks on the sidewalk. Claire and Jonathan followed in silence. Then softly, Claire spoke, almost a whisper. "I'm not waiting to see if you deserve this anymore." Jonathan looked over. She didn't meet his eyes, just kept walking. "Because I already know. Not because you changed, but because you stayed." The sun was gentle. The air smelled of fresh blossoms. And a family, not perfect, not loud, but whole, walked quietly through the city. A day in June. The sky was gentle, not too sunny, not a hint of rain. Just soft enough for an outdoor ceremony. There was no choir, no elaborate dress, no scripted vows. Just a small backyard garden behind Claire's mother's house in Brooklyn. A few close friends, a row of white wooden chairs, a pale cream tablecloth, and little Lily in her blue dress, carefully carrying a velvet pillow tied with 2 rings. Claire wore a simple linen dress. Her hair was pulled up in a loose bun. She wasn't trying to be the perfect bride, just herself, the woman who had walked through long, sleepless nights, who had raised a child on her own, and today stood here at peace. Jonathan wore a white shirt and a light gray blazer. No tie. His heart was pounding, not from fear of losing anything, but because, for the first time in his life, he wasn't running from anything anymore. Lily stood between them, beaming. "Can I say something?" she asked, her voice bright. The guests laughed gently. Claire nodded. Lily raised a small gold bracelet, one that had once belonged to her mother, now polished and gleaming. But this time there was a new charm attached, a small heart engraved with the words, "We stayed." Lily held it up proudly. "This bracelet was Mommy's. Daddy gave it to her. But today I get to wear it, because family means we don't leave each other behind." Jonathan knelt down and fastened the bracelet around her wrist. Claire watched them, her eyes quietly welling up. There weren't loud cheers, no dramatic applause, but in every glance shared by those who witnessed it, one thing was understood. This wasn't a fairy tale ending to a love story. It was the healing of a family that once thought they were lost for good. Later that evening, after the guests had gone and the sky had turned a dusky gray, Claire and Jonathan sat together beneath a string of warm patio lights. Lily was curled up beside them on a chair, fast asleep with a stuffed bear in her arms. The bracelet sparkled faintly with each gentle breath. Jonathan turned to Claire. "Do you think things would have been different if I hadn't left?" Claire shook her head slowly. "No, because if you hadn't left, I might never have realized how strong I could be, and you might never have learned that love isn't in the promises we make, but in the choice to stay when everything gets hard, because love doesn't have to be perfect to be worth it. It just has to hold on when it matters most. If you've ever been hurt, left behind, or had to learn how to be strong on your own, know this: not everyone who leaves is gone forever, and not every crack means the story is over. You deserve to be loved again, not despite your past, but because you survived it. If you've ever waited for someone to come back, drop a comment below. I'm still here. Someone out there may need to see it. And don't forget to follow the page for more stories that remind you hope is real, and sometimes people do come home.